The message was never meant for her. It was a careless moment, a tired thumb, and a heart that hadn't felt warmth in years. One accidental tap, one wrong name, and suddenly, Daniel Harper's quiet, one accidental tap, one wrong name, and suddenly, Daniel Harper's quiet, carefully controlled life began to unravel in ways he never could have imagined. He stared at his phone as if it had betrayed him. The words glowed back at him, shameless and irreversible, something light, playful, something he had meant to send as a joke to a friend who understood his sarcasm. But instead, it had gone to the one person in his life who stood at the opposite end of everything personal, his boss. And then came the reply. "What should I wear tonight?" Daniel felt his chest tighten, his breath caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. His boss, Amelia Reed, was not someone people joked with. She was composed, distant, and known for her razor-sharp professionalism. She didn't flirt. She didn't blur lines. She certainly didn't respond like that. But she had. And just like that, the fragile routine Daniel had built for himself and his 6-year-old daughter began to tremble. Before we go deeper into this story, take a moment, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unexpected ways life can change, like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Silent Hope. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Daniel wasn't always this cautious version of himself. Once, he had been carefree, the kind of man who laughed easily and trusted deeply. But life had a way of reshaping people. His wife had walked out when their daughter, Lily, was barely 2 years old, leaving behind a silence that echoed louder than any argument ever could. From that moment on, Daniel became both mother and father, provider and protector. Every morning began before sunrise. He would prepare Lily's breakfast, braid her hair clumsily but with care, and walk her to school before heading to his job at a corporate firm where expectations were high and mistakes were costly. Amelia Reed was the kind of boss who noticed everything. She valued precision, discipline, and results. Daniel respected her, feared disappointing her, and kept a strict boundary between his personal struggles and professional life. Until that text. The rest of that evening blurred into a haze of anxiety. Daniel considered apologizing immediately, but what would he say? That it was a mistake? That it wasn't meant for her? Would that make things better or worse? He imagined awkward glances, uncomfortable meetings, and the possibility, however small, that he might lose the job he desperately needed. At home, Lily noticed his distraction. She tugged at his sleeve while he absent-mindedly stirred a pot on the stove, her small voice cutting through his spiraling thoughts. She asked him why he looked sad, and Daniel forced a smile, assuring her everything was fine. But children have a way of sensing truths adults try to hide. That night, sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that message, that reply, and all the questions it carried. The next morning, Daniel walked into the office with a weight pressing down on his chest. He avoided looking at Amelia's office, but avoidance only made the tension worse. Hours passed before he was finally called in. He expected coldness, perhaps even reprimand. But what he found instead was something far more unsettling. Amelia was calm, too calm. She gestured for him to sit, her expression unreadable. There was no mention of the text at first. They discussed reports, deadlines, and projections as if nothing unusual had happened. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Daniel could feel it in the way her eyes lingered a moment longer than usual, in the subtle softness that hadn't been there before. Days turned into weeks, and the incident remained unspoken, yet its presence lingered like a quiet secret shared between them. Amelia began to notice things about Daniel she had overlooked before: the exhaustion in his eyes, the careful way he balanced his responsibilities, the quiet strength it took to raise a child alone. And Daniel began to see Amelia differently too. Behind her composed exterior was a woman carrying her own burdens. Late nights at the office weren't just about ambition, they were about avoidance. Avoidance of an empty home, of memories she had locked away, of a life that hadn't turned out the way she once imagined. The accidental message had cracked something open between them, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a slow, almost invisible shift. One evening, when deadlines stretched late and most of the office had emptied, Amelia surprised Daniel by asking about his life outside work. It wasn't intrusive, just curious. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain, Daniel found himself answering honestly. He spoke about Lily, her laughter, her stubbornness, the way she insisted on bedtime stories even when he was too tired to keep his eyes open. As he talked, something softened in Amelia's expression, something that made her seem less like a distant authority figure and more like someone who understood what it meant to feel alone. That conversation became a turning point. Gradually, their interactions grew warmer. Not inappropriate, not crossing any clear lines, but undeniably more personal. Amelia began to admire Daniel's resilience, and Daniel began to appreciate the quiet compassion he discovered in her. Still, fear lingered. Daniel worried about misreading signals, about risking the stability he had fought so hard to build. His daughter depended on him, and he couldn't afford to make mistakes driven by emotion. At the same time, a part of him longed for connection, for the possibility that life could hold more than just survival. The real shift came on a rainy evening. Daniel had been delayed at work, and Lily's school called to inform him she was still waiting to be picked up. Panic surged through him as he realized how late it had gotten. Amelia overheard the conversation and, without hesitation, offered to drive him. The car ride was quiet at first, filled with the sound of rain tapping against the windows. But when they arrived and Lily ran into Daniel's arms, something changed. Amelia watched from a distance as father and daughter reunited, as Daniel knelt to apologize and Lily forgave him instantly, wrapping her small arms around his neck. There was a purity in that moment, a kind of love that asked for nothing but presence. And it touched something deep within Amelia. From that day on, she was no longer just Daniel's boss. She became part of his world in small, careful steps. She met Lily, hesitantly at first, then with growing warmth. Lily, in her innocent honesty, accepted her without question, bringing laughter into moments that once felt heavy. For Daniel, it was both beautiful and terrifying. He had built walls to protect himself and his daughter, and now those walls were beginning to crumble. He feared loss, feared disappointment, feared the possibility that this fragile happiness could disappear just as suddenly as it had appeared. But life has a way of asking us to take risks when we least expect it. The truth finally surfaced on a quiet evening when Daniel and Amelia found themselves alone after another long day. The weight of unspoken words became too heavy to ignore. Daniel admitted the truth about the text, that it had been a mistake, never meant for her. He braced himself for disappointment, for the possibility that everything they had built would collapse in that moment. But Amelia surprised him. She smiled, not with embarrassment or anger, but with a kind of quiet understanding. She admitted that she had known all along. The message had been out of character, too casual to be intentional. But instead of correcting it, she had chosen to respond. Because, in that fleeting moment, she had wanted to feel something different. Something human. What started as an accident had become an opportunity, one she hadn't expected, but one she didn't regret. That night, something shifted permanently between them. Their connection was no longer defined by uncertainty or hesitation. It was real, grounded in honesty and mutual understanding. They had both been shaped by loss, by loneliness, by the quiet struggles no one else saw. And somehow, through a simple mistake, their paths had crossed in a way that brought light back into their lives. Daniel learned that it was okay to open his heart again, that love didn't have to replace what was lost, it could exist alongside it, creating something new. Amelia learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that allowing someone in didn't mean losing control, it meant gaining connection. And Lily, in her own simple way, became the bridge that brought them closer, reminding them that love doesn't need to be perfect to be real. Now, before we reach the ending, here's a special request. Comment below with, "Second chances matter," if you believe that even the smallest mistakes can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. As time passed, their lives intertwined naturally. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just quiet moments of care, of understanding, of being there for each other when it mattered most. Daniel no longer felt alone in his struggles. Amelia no longer felt the need to hide from her own life. And together, they created a space where all three of them could belong. The accidental message that once filled Daniel with dread became a story they would one day laugh about, a reminder that sometimes, life's most meaningful moments come from the least expected places. And in the end, what began as a mistake turned into something far greater, a second chance at love, at family, at hope. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Silent